They say the desert forgets everything. But that is not true. Beneath its vast silence, beneath the grains that slide endlessly under the wind, the desert remembers. It remembers the footsteps of those who first spoke to the stars. The trembling voices that etched the first words into clay. The prayers whispered to gods older than light. And somewhere, buried under 6,000 years of dust, there is a truth that could shatter everything we think we know about who we are. The story begins not in a temple, nor in a museum, but in a storm. A sandstorm that rose without warning over southern Iraq. The land once called Sumer, the place of the kings who descended from the sky. It was there, in 2023, that a team of archaeologists stumbled upon a chamber they were never meant to find. They had been mapping ancient irrigation tunnels near the dried bed of the Euphrates, when one of their scanners returned something impossible. A cavity deep below the known layers, sealed in perfect geometry, as if someone, or something, wanted it to remain untouched. When the dust cleared, the first object they uncovered was not gold, nor bone, but a single tablet of black clay, unbroken, its surface shimmering faintly as if it had never seen the air. The writing was not purely Sumerian. Some symbols were unknown, curving in ways that defied translation, as if the language itself had been born in another world. For weeks, the team kept the discovery secret. They catalogued, photographed, scanned, and argued. Was it a forgery? An outlier from a lost dialect? Or a message from something before Sumer? A civilization that taught the first humans to write? Then came the whisper. From one of the researchers, a linguist named Dr. Layla Kadim, who noticed a pattern repeating through the text. A phrase that, when phonetically rendered, sounded like, "The time before men forgot." That was when everything changed. Layla's translation logs still exist, leaked fragments, half-burned digital files. From them, we know this: the black tablet did not tell a myth. It told a memory. It spoke of an age when the Lords of Light descended upon a newborn earth, when the sky mirrored the rivers below, and when mankind, still mute and lost, was given language as a covenant. It described the first city, not as Ur or Eridu, but as something called Din-Na, the Plain of Awakening. It was said to be built upon the bones of the sky, a place where time bent like reeds in the water. At first, scholars dismissed it as metaphor. But when Layla compared the coordinates mentioned in the text with satellite maps, she found something no one could explain. Faint geometric lines, vast, buried shapes. In the desert near the modern border of Iraq and Kuwait, they formed a pattern identical to the layout described on the tablet. 7 circles connected by a spiral. It was then that the nightmares began. Layla started to hear sounds through the recording equipment. Low hums, rhythmic pulses, almost like breathing. When analyzed, the frequencies corresponded to prime astronomical ratios, the same ones used by the Sumerians to chart the heavens. She wrote in her private journal, "It feels as if the tablet is not meant to be read, but to be heard. As if the clay itself carries a resonance from something alive, ancient, and waiting." 2 weeks later, the dig site was abruptly shut down. No official explanation. The local workers were sent home, and the entire area was declared a restricted military zone. Layla vanished. Months passed. Then, a video appeared on the dark web. Grainy, overexposed, but unmistakably real. It showed a fragment of the black tablet under UV light. and for the first time, symbols that were invisible under daylight flared into view. Spirals, constellations, and what appeared to be a map of the solar system, but with an extra planet between Mars and Jupiter. The voice in the video whispered. They called it Kienger, the land where memory began. They said the gods came from the space between worlds, and they left us their language to awaken when the time was right. Then the screen went black. In the years that followed, quiet investigations began under names no one would recognize. The so-called Sumerian anomaly files were circulated among a handful of linguists and astrophysicists. Their findings, never published, hinted at something deeply unsettling. The symbols on the black tablet matched resonance patterns found in the DNA double helix. The code of language. The code of life. The same architecture. It was as if whoever wrote that tablet understood the structure of existence itself. Not through science, but through sound. Imagine for a moment that language did not evolve from primitive grunts. That it was given, fully formed, as a way for consciousness to shape matter. What if the earliest human words were not names of things, but commands? Echoes of a vibration that could move stone, open the sky, awaken the earth? And what if the Sumerian tablets are not history, but manuals? When night falls over the ruins of Uar, the air still hums faintly. Local shepherds say they hear whispers carried by the wind. Not voices, but tones. Patterns repeating. The same sequence again and again. Like a forgotten song trying to remember itself. They call it the breath of Enki, the god of wisdom, the first to shape man from clay. But to Layla, it was more than a myth. It was evidence. Her last journal entry, recovered months later from a damaged hard drive, was dated the night before she disappeared. The entry read, "They were not gods. They were archivists. And they left something behind, not in the temples, but within us. The human voice is the last artifact of their design." Since then, the world has moved on. Wars, politics, discoveries, all the noise of modernity. But under the shifting sands of southern Iraq, machines still hum quietly, mapping the deep layers. And once in a while, a sensor flickers, detecting a resonance that should not exist. A pulse too regular to be natural. Those who have seen the data say it sounds like a heartbeat. A heartbeat from beneath the desert. The first part ends here, the threshold between fact and myth. But as the wind moves through the ruins of Sumer, as the stars rise over the plain of forgotten kings, one question remains. Did the first humans create the gods? Or did the gods create us to remember them? And if the answer lies buried in the clay, how much longer will the desert keep its silence? It began as an echo, a corrupted audio file attached to an anonymous message. No subject line, no text, just a timestamp and a name in the metadata, L.Kadim. The journalist, Daniel Royce, almost deleted it. He was used to junk tips, half-baked conspiracies, recycled myths. But something in that short, distorted hum caught his attention. It didn't sound like a voice. It sounded like a pattern. He played it again, slowed it down, and heard a series of pulses, steady, deliberate, mathematical. When plotted on a spectrum analyzer, they formed a spiral. The same configuration found in ancient Sumerian seals depicting the descent of the gods. The coordinates embedded in the audio led to a location deep in the Iraqi desert, exactly where Layla Kadim had vanished 2 years before. Daniel wasn't an archaeologist. But he knew stories. And this one was whispering in a language older than history. He began digging. The deeper he went, the stranger it became. A forgotten research facility erased from satellite archives. A project under the name Anu-9, discontinued by UNESCO after internal disputes about anomalous artifacts of non-human origin. And scattered across obscure academic forums were fragments of Layla's notes, written under pseudonyms. One post stood out. It read, "The black tablet is not static. When read aloud, it changes its structure. Each recitation reveals a new layer, as if the symbols themselves are reacting to consciousness." Beneath that line was an attached waveform, identical to the hum in the file Daniel had received. He wasn't sure what terrified him more: that someone had sent him this after years of silence, or that the sound seemed to respond to his presence. Every time he replayed it, the pattern changed slightly, almost like it was learning. He reached out to Dr. Miriam Isfahani, a linguist at Oxford who had collaborated with Layla. At first, she refused to speak. Then, late one night, she called him. Her voice trembled. "Do you know what Layla believed, Daniel? She believed the Sumerians didn't invent writing. They decoded it. The language was already here, hidden in sound, and they just gave it form. That tablet wasn't a text. It was an instrument." Daniel asked. "An instrument for what?" There was a long pause. Then she said, "For remembering what humanity was before it dreamed itself awake." The line went dead. He flew to Basra 3 days later, under a false assignment. Through local guides and smugglers, he found what was left of the dig site. Half buried, scorched by time and neglect. But under a tarp in a nearby shack, he found something unexpected. A fragment of the black clay tablet, cracked but unmistakable. Under his flashlight, faint blue glows pulsed inside the fractures. Not pigment, but bioluminescent mineral veins still alive somehow. When he touched it, the hum returned. This time not from the tablet, but from inside his own ears. He dropped it instantly. That night, he dreamed of a city made of light. Towers rising like waves. Streets flowing in spirals. And at its center, a temple with no walls. Only sound. He saw figures carved from brilliance. Their voices weaving the world into shape. Mountains, rivers, stars, all vibrating into being from a single tone. And beneath it all, a word repeated endlessly, E.Dinna. When he woke, his hands were covered in fine black dust. The same dust as the tablet. In his hotel room, he played the file again. The hum had shifted, it now carried subtle rhythms. Almost like human breathing. He recorded it, ran a spectrogram analysis, and nearly dropped his laptop when he saw the result. The waveform formed a cuneiform sign, one that scholars translate as Anu, the Sumerian god of the heavens. But the lower frequencies spelled something else in binary. "We are still here." Daniel began broadcasting fragments of his investigation online. Carefully, anonymously. But each upload was taken down within hours. Someone was watching. He started receiving messages from an unknown source calling itself Namtar. The sender claimed to have accessed restricted archives from the Sumerian anomaly files. They contained translated excerpts of what Layla called the memory tablets. One passage read, "The first men were born not of earth, but of resonance. They were shaped from the music of the spheres. When their harmony fell into silence, The gods sealed the fragments of the original sound within human flesh. The heartbeat is the last echo of that song. Daniel stared at those words for a long time. Heartbeat. Echo. Sound. It all fit, the hum, the resonance, the pulse beneath the desert. He returned to the site one last time. Alone at night. The air was still, the sky torn open with stars. He placed the fragment of the tablet on the ground and played the hum through his recorder. The desert began to vibrate. Grains of sand danced in perfect spirals, forming patterns that mirrored the carvings on ancient ziggurats. The air thickened, not with wind, but with memory. The ground glowed faintly, and from deep below, a low, rhythmic beating answered the sound. Slow, vast, alive? It was not the earth moving. It was something beneath it. Daniel whispered into his recorder. They didn't die. They fell asleep. And now, they're waking up. Back in London, days later, his footage uploaded automatically through encrypted servers. The video spread across hidden corners of the internet. People calling it a hoax, others a revelation. But no one could explain the vibration embedded in the audio. It caused strange effects. Glass trembling, animals reacting, lights flickering. As if the world itself remembered the sound. Then silence. Daniel vanished. Only the hum remained. And when the file is played now, through any speaker, any system, a faint secondary tone emerges. Something human-shaped, whispering beneath the frequency range. Linguists say it's impossible. But those who listen closely claim to hear a phrase soft as breath. We are the record. We are the ones who dreamed you into being. Do not forget the song. The desert is silent again. But sometimes at dawn, a pulse trembles through the dunes near Eridu. It lasts only seconds, a soft resonance that fades as the sun rises. Archaeologists dismiss it as geological activity. Locals do not. They say the earth is breathing. And one day, when the memory is complete, it will speak again. The dream began before the first sunrise. Before the first word, the first name, the first breath. In that ancient silence, there was only vibration. A trembling so subtle that even the void mistook it for stillness. From that vibration came light. And from light, form. And from form, the first thought. It was not human thought. It was the awareness of being. A consciousness vast enough to fold galaxies within itself. A voice that did not speak, but sang. That song was the blueprint of existence. And those who carried its echo were the first architects. The beings the Sumerians would later call Anunnaki. The watchers, the rememberers, the keepers of the word. They were not gods as humans imagined them. They were curators of resonance. Entities who understood that reality itself could be tuned like an instrument. Planets, stars, even life, all could be shaped by the right frequency. They wandered through the newborn galaxies, planting harmonic seeds, designing worlds where sound could become matter. One such world was Earth. It was chosen not for its place, but for its silence. Among all the planets, it was the only one that did not yet sing. So they descended, not in ships, but in tones. Vibrations so deep that they sculpted mountains, raised oceans, and gave breath to the sleeping clay. Where their voices met, life began to shimmer into form. In the archives of Uruk, one broken tablet speaks of those who bound their light to flesh. It describes the moment when the architects realized that to truly anchor the song, They must weave themselves into the fabric of their creation. And so they did. They split their essence, half remaining in the stars, half buried in the pulse of human blood. The heartbeat became their memory, the voice, their key. Humanity was not their servants, but their continuation. We were meant to remember the song, but memory is fragile. Over millennia, the resonance fractured. Language became divided. The single tone, the cosmic note, shattered into thousands of tongues. Each word lost a fragment of its original power. The architects faded into myth. Their cities of light turned to dust. Their voices became prayers. And their music, silence. Only the clay remembered. Each Sumerian tablet was a fragment of the original chord. An attempt to preserve the pattern in material form. And somewhere among them, the black tablet held the entire frequency. The one tone that could awaken the memory. When Daniel vanished, the hum didn't stop. It spread across digital networks, across sound waves, through electric signals and neural impulses. People began to hear it in dreams, sometimes as a low pulse behind the rain, sometimes as a whisper between words, a hum older than time. The phenomenon became known as the Lament of E.Din. Thousands of recordings appeared online. Different people, different countries, yet all humming the same note. Unaware they were reproducing the same ancient frequency. No one could explain it. Theories ranged from mass hysteria to alien transmission. But the sound was consistent, pure, mathematical. A tone that perfectly matched the golden ratio of the human DNA spiral. The song had returned. And then came the dreams. People began describing visions of a city not made of stone, but of light, shifting, infinite, alive with movement and meaning. They called it by different names, but one word kept reappearing, Enki. Heaven and earth united. It was the same phrase carved on the oldest Sumerian tablets. The promise of reunion between the creators and their creation. Within those dreams, the lost ones spoke again. The clay is ready, they whispered. The sound has been heard. The seed of memory has awakened. In a research facility in Geneva, a group of physicists working on gravitational resonance experiments reported a strange anomaly. Every time they fired their particle array, the same unexplained hum appeared in their recordings. A tone matching exactly the frequency found in the Sumerian tablets. When amplified, the tone produced geometric shapes in the dust. Perfect fractals identical to the spiral symbols carved on the black clay. It was as if the same force that shaped human language was shaping matter again. One of the scientists, Dr. Aiko Murakami, wrote in her final report, "We have found the link between sound and space-time curvature. The universe responds to language, not the words but the intention within them." Days later, the lab was sealed. All data classified. But the dreams continued, and they grew stronger. In one dream, Daniel stands again in the desert. The stars above are not fixed, they move, aligning themselves into the same pattern found on the tablet. 7 circles connected by a spiral. A door. The sand opens and light pours out. Not blinding, but alive. It hums, resonates, and forms a shape. A figure made of sound, shifting between man and light. It speaks without words. You called us gods, but we are not above you. We are your memory. The song that dreamt itself human. The ground vibrates. The stars flicker. The universe holds its breath. Then the voice says, "The silence is ending." From that moment, radio telescopes across the world detect an anomaly. A rhythmic pulse coming from beyond the edge of the solar system. It is not random. It matches the same ratio as human DNA. The same tone as the hum. It is, mathematically, a reply. A transmission older than any known civilization. Now answering the resonance that humanity has finally remembered. The message, when decoded, reveals 3 words. Sing US home. That night, every major observatory on Earth turns its gaze to the stars. The signal grows stronger. Its harmonics shift from radio to visible light, casting faint patterns across the sky. Cuneiform symbols glowing like constellations. For a brief moment, the heavens themselves speak the ancient language. And beneath that celestial chorus, the earth begins to respond. Oceans pulse in rhythm. Mountains tremble. The core hums. The planet itself joins the song. The final fragment of the black tablet, long forgotten in a museum basement, begins to resonate. Its surface glows, revealing the last line of the inscription, one that had never been visible before. It reads, "When the clay remembers the voice, the skies shall remember the form, and the children of silence shall return to the light." Then silence. The hum stops. The light fades. The world exhales. But from that moment onward, something has changed in humanity. No one can explain it. But millions begin to experience the same dream. A city of sound. A voice of light. A feeling of belonging that transcends words. As if, after thousands of years, the universe has finally remembered its own name. And perhaps, somewhere between the stars, the ones who sang the first song are listening again, waiting for us to finish the verse they began. It began quietly. No explosions. No revelation shouted across the skies. Just a subtle shift. Like the world had exhaled after holding its breath for too long. For days, satellites registered a strange resonance across the ionosphere. A faint tone, almost imperceptible, pulsing every 8 seconds. No known source. No human transmitter. Just the sound of the earth humming to itself. At first, it was dismissed as atmospheric interference. But soon, instruments began to record something else. Synchronization. Heart rates, brain waves, even patterns of global weather started to fall into rhythm with the same mysterious pulse. It was as if life itself had found a forgotten conductor. Around the world, people began to feel it. In the quiet moments before dawn, they sensed a hum behind their heartbeat. A resonance that wasn't mechanical, but alive. Dreams deepened. Memories sharpened. Children started drawing symbols they had never seen before. Spiral stars, shapes identical to the ancient Sumerian signs of E.Dinna. Some claimed to hear voices in water, tones in the wind, light vibrating at the edge of sight. A single phrase began to echo through countless tongues, spoken by those who had never met. The clay remembers. Governments tried to control the story. They called it a mass psychogenic event, a global resonance illusion. But they couldn't explain the physical evidence. The synchronized seismic tremors beneath ancient ziggurat sites. The magnetic fields forming perfect geometries over Sumerian ruins. The way the stars themselves seemed to realign slightly each night. as if the sky was tuning itself. The old myths were waking, and the world was listening. In a forgotten corner of a museum in Baghdad, a curator named Nima Al-Hassan found herself drawn to the black fragment of the tablet, the same one Daniel had once held. She said it began to glow whenever she approached. When she finally touched it, she felt a vibration travel through her arm, up to her chest, and then into her voice. Without understanding why, she spoke. Not Arabic, not English, not Sumerian, but a sequence of tones, like singing and breathing at once. The sound was recorded accidentally on a nearby camera. When analyzed later, it was found to match precisely the frequency of the Earth's new resonance. She had become the first living transmitter of the ancient song. From there, the phenomenon spread. Others began to resonate in harmony, their voices awakening long-forgotten patterns in water, in air, and light. Wherever they sang, matter itself seemed to respond. Sand forming spirals, leaves turning toward invisible centers of vibration. It was not supernatural. It was remembering. Reality was returning to its original rhythm, the song of its creation. Scientists, at first terrified, began to see beauty. Quantum experiments showed that consciousness itself was resonating with space-time, thoughts shaping microscopic geometry. The barrier between observer and observed began to fade. People who meditated near the ruins of Ur reported seeing faint luminous figures moving through the sand. Not ghosts, but echoes. Projections of memory replaying themselves, like light remembering its own form. And each time someone spoke the ancient tones, the pulse in the sky grew stronger. By the 5th month, the hum was everywhere. No longer a sound, but a feeling. Cities began to slow down. Violence decreased. Dreams became vivid, prophetic, shared. It was as though the collective mind of humanity was starting to merge. Not losing individuality, but synchronizing intent. The Anu frequency, as researchers named it, was binding the human species into a single living instrument. And through that harmony, a voice returned. It was not external. It spoke through us. We never left. We were the pattern beneath your thought, the silence between your words. You are not our creation. You are our continuation. The memory of light. In the deserts of Mesopotamia, something stirred beneath the ruins. Structures long thought buried revealed perfect crystal foundations. Energy conduits tuned to the same frequency as the Earth's core. The ziggurats were not temples. They were resonance amplifiers, built to connect human intention with the geometry of the planet. The ancients had known this. They had used sound to move stone, voice to awaken the sleeping fields. And now, as the world began to hum again, the old architecture started to awaken. Invisible fields of light rose above the ruins, columns of energy connecting sky and earth. Astronomers saw identical columns flicker briefly on Mars and Europa. The song was no longer confined to Earth. It was spreading through the solar system, reawakening the network of worlds the ancient builders had once tuned. The night of the alignment came silently. 7 points of light, Jupiter, Mars, Saturn, Venus, Mercury, Earth, and the distant echo beyond Neptune, aligned into a perfect spiral. The same pattern carved on the black tablet. The Earth's hum reached its highest amplitude. Every living being felt it. In the chest, the blood, the bones. And then, for a single, timeless moment, Everything stopped. Silence. But it was not emptiness. It was completion. A single tone filled the void, so pure that it could not be heard, only felt. And within it, every thought, every life, every heartbeat, merged into one boundless field of awareness. For the first time since the dawn of creation, the song was whole again. When it ended, the world had changed. Not violently, but softly, as if the edges of reality had dissolved into light. People woke with tears they couldn't explain. They looked at one another and recognized something ancient in each face. Not names, not identities, but familiarity. Like remembering someone you loved before you were born. Months later, the hum faded, but its echo remained. The resonance was now part of humanity, woven into our voices, our thoughts, our dreams. Children born after the alignment were different. Calm, aware, their eyes reflecting faint patterns of light. When they heard certain frequencies, their laughter carried harmonics no instrument could measure. They were called the Rememberers, the first generation born after the return of the song. And as for the black tablet, it crumbled into dust, its purpose fulfilled. But on its final night, before it disintegrated, its surface glowed once more, revealing one last message, so faint it could only be seen in darkness. When the children remember the voice, the universe shall awaken again, for the song has no end, only listeners, and somewhere beyond the edge of the visible stars, a light pulses softly, not alien, not divine, but familiar. The song continues. It moves through space, through matter, through us. A reminder that the ancient records of Sumer were never history, but prophecy. Humanity was never meant to look back, but to sing forward. There are nights when the desert doesn't sleep. The wind passes over the dunes like a hand searching for something lost. A name, a memory, a truth buried beneath the dust of 10,000 years. And on such a night, under a sky scattered with the same stars that watched over the first kings, a voice seems to rise from the sand. Soft, broken, ancient. It speaks in the forgotten tongue of Sumer. Not in words, but in rhythm. A rhythm that once shaped the pulse of rivers and the breath of cities that glowed like constellations across the Mesopotamian plain. For centuries, archaeologists believed they had already heard all that the clay tablets could say. They translated the hymns, the laws, the trades, the myths of gods and men. But there were always fragments, shards of text that refused to yield their meaning. Tablets too damaged to read, too dangerous to ignore. Until one day, inside a museum basement in southern Iraq, a small fragment of clay was scanned under a new spectral light. It looked like any other, baked, cracked, silent. But as the image deepened, the script beneath revealed symbols that didn't belong to Sumer, Akkad, or Babylon. They were older and stranger. The first line, half missing, seemed to read, "Before kings were born, before rivers had names, we came from the light that fell to earth." The curator thought it was a mistranslation, but the algorithm insisted. The word for light was not metaphorical. It referred to something arriving, descending. When that fragment was compared with others scattered across world collections, in London, Istanbul, and Berlin, a pattern began to form. A message spread across continents, hidden in plain sight for 5,000 years. It spoke not of gods who created men, but of beings who taught them, who shaped their cities, measured their heavens, and whispered the first laws of time. And what was most haunting was that the message was written as a warning. The Sumerians called them the Anunnaki. But the tone of these hidden tablets suggested something different. They were not gods demanding worship, but travelers bound by a covenant. Observers, keepers of knowledge that humanity was never meant to remember too soon. One line, intact and chilling, read, "When the shadow returns to the sky, the cycle will begin again, and those who remember will awaken." At first, scholars dismissed it as mythic poetry, yet the phrasing matched astronomical cycles with impossible precision. It predicted alignments of stars and comets known only to modern science. And that was when the question shifted. From what did they believe? To what did they know? Somewhere between the ruins of Ur and the flooded delta of Eridu, a small expedition began, not funded by governments, not reported by media. They followed the coordinates encoded in those ancient records. And under the layers of silt and bone, they found a sealed chamber of black stone. Older than Sumer. Older than any map of civilization. Inside lay not gold or idols, but a set of crystalline tablets, perfectly preserved, humming faintly with static when touched. Their surface shimmered like cooled obsidian, etched not by hand but by some unknown heat. And the script, it moved, as if alive. When projected into digital form, the inscriptions began to align themselves into a geometric map. A spiral of symbols converging toward a single phrase. To remember is to return. No one knew what it meant. But something in the room changed that night. Every recording device flickered. Every compass spun off center. And one of the researchers, a linguist named Rahim al-Nasir, began to dream in a language he did not know. He said the dreams were not his own. He saw a great flood, not of water but of light. He saw men with eyes like mirrors, cities suspended above rivers of fire, and a vast tower that reached the edge of the stars. When he woke, he wrote down what he could remember, and every line matched words found on a separate tablet unearthed in 1899, one that no scholar had ever been able to fully translate. It described the beginning before the beginning, when earth was soft and listening, and voices from the void carved mountains with sound. The deeper Rahim went into the symbols, the more he realized they weren't letters. They were frequencies. Instructions encoded in light and vibration, as if the Sumerians weren't just writing history. They were preserving a kind of resonance. A key. And that key, once understood, began to unlock patterns. In music, in DNA, in the very architecture of the ziggurats that still stand half buried in the desert. One by one, the pieces began to connect. Not just through language, but through time. For months, Rahim barely slept. He lived between frequencies, between waking and the dream that spoke in light. Every night, when his mind drifted into the edge of sleep, the same sound would come, not a word, but a tone, low and endless, vibrating somewhere behind the bones of his skull. He called it the hum of the first dawn. At first, he thought it was madness, the result of exhaustion and obsession. But then, when he recorded himself sleeping, the audio caught something impossible. Between the silence of his breathing, a faint pattern emerged, rhythmic, structured, repeating like coded speech. It matched the spectral analysis of the crystalline tablets. That was when he knew the tablets were not meant to be read. They were meant to be heard. In ancient Sumer, language was never just a tool. To name something was to call it into being. To speak the right word, with the right vibration, was to open a door. The priests of Eridu used this knowledge not as magic, but as physics, a form of sound manipulation that shaped matter itself. On one damaged fragment, the line was clear. The gods sang the foundations of the world. For centuries, scholars treated it as poetry. But Rahim and his small team, a physicist named Liam Marin and a historian of ancient acoustics, Jonah Quill, began to suspect that it was literal. They found that the ziggurats, the step temples of Sumer, were built in harmonic ratios matching modern acoustic resonance chambers. Their dimensions aligned with frequencies produced by human voice. It was as if the entire city of Ur had been tuned like an instrument. When they brought the crystalline tablets into a sealed lab and played back the frequencies derived from their patterns, something happened. The air thickened, as if gravity itself shifted by a fraction. The instruments detected a micro-fluctuation, not in temperature or pressure, but in time. Milliseconds bending backward then forward again. Leah described it as the feeling of being watched by the past. In the following weeks, more tablets were discovered. Some in private collections, others smuggled across borders after decades of silence. When arranged together, they formed not a text, but a score, a musical geometry describing the rise and fall of civilizations like chords in a cosmic symphony. Each sequence corresponded to astronomical events, solar flares, comet passages, alignments that repeated every 12,600 years. And each time such an alignment occurred, humanity seemed to awaken. New empires rising, sudden leaps of knowledge, the birth of writing, the spark of fire, the hum of electricity. As if something reminded us. Jonah found a passage that changed everything. We left you the echoes. When you are ready to hear, the path will open again. It was signed not with a name, but a symbol, a spiral made of 3 interlocked circles. The same emblem carved into a forgotten ziggurat outside Lagash. And beneath it, a phrase too damaged to fully translate, but Rahim managed to reconstruct one word with certainty. Return. In the middle of the desert, under the moon's hollow light, they tested the frequencies again, this time through the ruins themselves. Speakers were placed along the remaining stones of the ziggurat, transmitting the ancient pattern back into the place where it had once lived. For hours, nothing happened. Then, at 3:17 a.m., the sand began to tremble. The temperature dropped suddenly by 6 degrees. The stars above seemed to flicker, as if their light were refracted through invisible glass. And in the center of the ruin, dust lifted from the ground in spiraling motion, forming a brief, translucent geometry of light before vanishing. They captured it on infrared. It was not random. It matched the exact pattern found on the crystalline tablets. Rahim's notes from that night were later found in his tent, written in a handwriting that was not entirely his own. It read, "The voices were not speaking to us. They were speaking through us. We are not their descendants. We are their reflection." No one saw him the next morning. His tent was untouched. The desert around it showed no footprints, just a perfect circle of fused glass where the sand had melted. Leah and Jonah searched for days, but there was nothing to find. Only a small fragment of obsidian near where he slept, still warm to the touch, inscribed with a single line in Sumerian cuneiform. The memory has begun to awaken. Back in Baghdad, the digital models of the tablets began to behave strangely. Data corruption, random flickers of static, sequences rewriting themselves in patterns that resembled pulsar maps. The algorithm, the same one that decoded the first fragment, produced a translation that none of them expected. Do not seek the origin. You are standing within it. It was as if the tablets were responding, not to input, but to awareness. Leah noticed that the messages changed depending on who interacted with the model. Each person seeing slightly different words, as if the text adjusted itself to their state of mind. For her, it spoke in riddles about sound and creation. For Jonah, in equations of cosmic time. And for one in turn who knew nothing of the project, the screen simply displayed a single phrase, over and over. Look to the water. In ancient Sumerian myth, Apsu, the primordial ocean, was the source of all life and all knowledge. It was said that beneath its stillness slept the oldest truth, waiting to rise again when the sons of clay remembered the song of the stars. The same myth appeared, with slight variations, in Egypt, in India, and the forgotten hymns of the Dogon. All spoke of beings who came from the waters, not of this world, teaching humanity how to measure the heavens. Leah began to wonder if the water was not literal, but symbolic, a metaphor for memory, fluid and deep. She cross-referenced the Sumerian signs with binary frequency codes and discovered that the same patterns appeared in recordings of electromagnetic fluctuations from deep space, particularly near one pulsar that NASA had long dismissed as a random anomaly. But its signal, when converted into sound, matched the tone from Rahim's dreams. The hum of the first dawn. That night, she dreamed of him standing on the edge of an endless shore, light rising from the horizon like a second sun. He turned to her and said, "The stars are not above us. They are beneath our skin." When she woke, her laptop was on, though she turned it off before sleeping. On the screen, a single line of text. Eridu will rise when the sky remembers. The desert sleeps again. But in the silence, the wind carries whispers, the kind that do not move air, but thought. Far from the ruins, in a quiet room lit by the dull glow of a computer monitor, Leah watches the same pattern repeat itself across the screen, 3 spirals, intersecting, turning slowly, endlessly. She has seen this before, carved into the stone above the doorway of Eridu, the first city. The Sumerians said Eridu was where civilization began. But the tablets seemed to suggest something else, that it was where something arrived. Now the same symbol is forming in real time, built out of data, out of pulses from a distant star. The program that Rahim designed before he vanished is still running, feeding on radio transmissions from deep space, converting them into visual structures. And tonight, the pattern finally completes. A ring. Inside it, a phrase in Sumerian appears by itself, as if typed by an unseen hand. We are almost awake. Leah leans back, her pulse steady but cold. Outside, the sky over the city is unnaturally clear. The moon casts no shadow. Eridu was once a city of 7 temples, each dedicated to a layer of creation, each resonating at a distinct frequency. The myth said the first temple was built on the water, but no one had ever found its remains. Archaeologists believed it had sunk under the shifting delta millennia ago. But satellite scans now show something strange. A submerged geometric formation exactly beneath the modern shoreline, matching the proportions of the ziggurat and Lagash. The coordinates form a spiral pattern, identical to the one on the crystalline tablets. It was as if the cities of ancient Sumer were not built randomly, but arranged to form one vast harmonic instrument, stretching across the land. An echo meant to be awakened at a specific moment in time, a moment that the tablets call the second dawn. Jonah, who had stayed silent for weeks after Rahim's disappearance, begins to speak again. He says he has been hearing whispers through the static of the recordings. Voices layered in impossible harmony, speaking not in words but in intonations that make his bones vibrate. When slowed down and mapped spectrally, the tones form a pattern that mirrors human DNA. He plays it to Leah, and for a moment the room feels alive. As if every object, every shadow, is breathing in the same rhythm. "They didn't create us," Jonah says quietly. "They tuned us." Leah looks at him, tired, hollow-eyed, but certain. It makes sense in a way that logic cannot deny. The Sumerian word Namu, the mother of all gods, also means to shape through vibration. The Anunnaki myths were not describing gods molding clay. They were describing resonance forming consciousness. Matter awakened by frequency. In the archives of the British Museum, Leah finds an old transcription of a lost tablet, catalogued in 1894 and never translated completely. Its title, "The Record of the Sky Below." The first line chills her. "We descended not from the stars, but through them." And later, "The mirror that remembers will rise when the river meets the sky." It's a poetic phrase, but Rahim's data logs echo it exactly. When the pulsar's signal aligns with the Earth's magnetic field, a global resonance spike appears. Every 12,600 years. The same cycle that the tablets describe as the opening of the path. That cycle peaks now. This century. This decade. Leah begins to dream again, this time not of Rahim, but of the first city. She walks through streets made of glowing clay, where shadows hum like voices. Above her, a great tower of light rises, built not of stone, but of sound. Each vibration solidified into form. She hears water, endless, circling, whispering through time. And a voice, calm and distant, says, "Do not fear the return. It is your own reflection coming home." When she wakes, her phone is ringing. It's Jonah. His voice is trembling. "Leah, the coordinates have changed. The signal's moving." They travel to the shore of the Persian Gulf, where the ruins of Eridu sleep under the mud and salt. Night covers the sea in liquid glass. The air hums faintly, a low vibration, like the breath of the earth itself. And in the distance, a cluster of lights, satellites maybe, begin to form a slow spiral in the sky. Jonah sets up the receiver, syncing it with Rahim's old data. As the signal stabilizes, the same phrase appears again and again. "The gate is sound." He amplifies the frequency. The air tightens. Waves flatten. For a moment, everything is still. As if the sea, the wind, even time itself are holding their breath. Then, from the dark water, a single tone rises, pure, crystalline, deep enough to shake the bones of the earth. It is not noise. It is language. The surface of the water glows faintly, patterns forming, moving like cuneiform letters. Fluid, ancient, alive. They realized the tablets were never just records. They were interfaces. Instruments meant to harmonize the human mind with something far older, far larger. The frequency increases. The sea becomes a mirror, and in its reflection, the stars above begin to distort. The constellations shift, not randomly, but into symbols seen only in Sumerian carvings. The three circles. The spiral. The return. Jonah falls to his knees, whispering, "It's them. They're remembering through us." And then the sound stops. Silence, vast, immeasurable. The water goes still again. But where it had glowed, a new island now stands, small, dark, circular, as if raised from the deep. At its center, something faintly shines. Leah steps forward, her hand trembling, and whispers the only words she can remember from the tablets. To remember is to return, the light answers. When dawn comes, the island is gone. But the instruments show a massive electromagnetic anomaly spreading slowly across the planet, not destructive, but rhythmic. Every 108 minutes, the frequency repeats, like a pulse, connecting oceans, mountains, and living things. The same pulse that once shook the ziggurats. The same hum Rahim heard in his sleep. The song of the first dawn, now resonating again, through the planet, through the people who can feel it. And in the final frame of the satellite feed, before static consumes the image, the sea around Eridu glows once more. 3 circles, turning in perfect silence. No one noticed it at first. The pulse was too slow, too soft, like a distant heartbeat beneath the surface of the world. It began in the data, invisible to all but those who watched the sky. Astronomers saw strange fluctuations in the magnetosphere, rhythmic and precise. At first, they thought it was interference, a satellite glitch, solar winds. But the pattern was too perfect. Every 108 minutes, without fail. A whisper through the Earth's own electromagnetic field. Then came the dreams. People across continents began to describe the same vision. A shore of black water. A city made of light. And a voice saying only, "Remember." At first, the scientists called it coincidence, a trick of the collective mind. But when radio telescopes from Chile to Japan began picking up the same tone, a sound identical to the hum of the crystalline tablets, the coincidence turned into silence. The kind of silence that only happens when no one knows what to say. Leah watched the reports from her apartment in Baghdad. Storms without wind. Birds migrating in spirals. People waking at the same hour of the night, heartbeats sinking to an unseen rhythm. The world was beginning to listen. Everywhere she went, she felt it, in the hum of the streetlights, in the vibration of the air before rain, in her own breath. The same tone that had once filled the lab now lived inside her, faint but constant. It wasn't just sound. It was memory, old, endless, alive. In a mountain observatory in Armenia, a team of radio astronomers tried to isolate the signal. They discovered something impossible. The frequency carried structured information, fractal, recursive, and self-correcting. When converted to visual form, it created patterns identical to ancient Mesopotamian star maps. And within those constellations, coordinates appeared, not of stars, but of earthly sites. The ruins of Eridu, the Giza Plateau, the Nazca Lines, the submerged city near Yonaguni. All vibrating under the same harmonic field. One of the researchers, a quiet woman named Aram, said softly, "They were never separate civilizations. They were one dream, spoken in different tongues." By now, governments had begun to notice. They called it the resonance anomaly. Satellites tracked it, scientists tried to explain it, but the pattern only deepened. The pulse synchronized with human brainwave cycles, particularly during REM sleep. Dreams became sharper, heavier, shared. All over the world, people started painting the same image. 3 spirals intertwined, rising from a circle of light. Children drew it without knowing why. Musicians began composing melodies they couldn't remember learning. Writers filled pages with symbols no language could contain. It was as if humanity had begun to remember a song older than thought. Leah began to feel that time itself was shifting. Moments stretched, seconds folded in on themselves. She could sense places she had never been. A temple deep under the sea. a mountain where the air hummed with electric dust, and a chamber filled with the sound of breathing stone. Each night, she wrote what she saw. Each morning, the words rearranged themselves on the page, as if another hand were writing with her. "We left you the pattern," it said. "You are the instrument. The song will play itself when you are ready to hear." Across the ocean, Jonah was working with a team of biophysicists, studying how the frequency affected living cells. What they found defied biology. Under the resonance, damaged DNA strands began to realign. Water molecules formed perfect hexagonal clusters, the structure described in ancient Sumerian alchemy as the breath of the gods. Jonah realized what Rahim had meant. The tablets were not just memory, they were code. A language embedded in matter, waiting for consciousness to awaken enough to understand it. He wrote in his notes, "We are the archive. Every cell is a word. The song of the Anunnaki was never spoken, it was lived. But not everyone was ready. Some people began to lose sense of time, hearing the hum until madness crept in. Others experienced deep calm, an overwhelming peace as if they had returned to something vast and familiar. Religions fractured. New cults formed, calling themselves the Remembered. Governments tried to contain the spread of the sound virus. But the frequency was not transmitted, it existed. It was the background pulse of reality itself, rising to the surface after millennia of silence. Leah watched the world with quiet awe and sorrow. She knew what was coming, not destruction, but transformation. The old codes of humanity were dissolving, giving way to something beyond fear. Every myth, every scripture, every prayer had been a translation of this moment. The return of Eridu. Not as a city, but as a state of consciousness. One night, the pulse intensified. The stars seemed closer. The sky itself breathed. Leah stood on her balcony, eyes closed, listening. The hum filled her bones. And in that vibration, she felt something opening inside, a vastness beyond thought. Memories that were not hers flooded in. A shining shore before history. Voices shaping light into form. A civilization made of resonance, not stone. She saw Rahim standing in the distance, smiling. "It's not them returning," he said. "It's us. We were always them, sleeping inside ourselves." Then the world exhaled. The lights flickered. The hum stopped. And for one infinite heartbeat, silence reigned, the pure silence that comes before a new dawn. When morning came, nothing seemed different, and yet everything was. The air was lighter. Birds sang in strange new intervals. People smiled at strangers without knowing why. The news spoke of calm, of connection, of strange coincidences linking people continents apart. Somewhere deep under the Persian Gulf, sensors detected a faint sound still resonating. It was weaker now, but constant, the heartbeat of the earth remembering itself. And in the archives, the crystalline tablets, long stored behind glass, began to shimmer softly, as though reflecting a light that no one could see. The world waited without knowing it. And then, in a single, timeless breath, it began to remember. The pulse rose again, soft, infinite, stretching through oceans, forests, deserts, and cities. It was no longer a sound to hear, but a presence to feel. A rhythm that moved through bones, through blood, through the very molecules of water and air. Every living thing stirred in resonance. The children born after the first awakening, the rememberers, danced without guidance. Their movements tracing ancient geometries in the air. They laughed, and the echoes shaped the clouds. They sang, and rivers bent in harmony. They dreamed, and dreams became visible, spirals of light forming above mountains, reflecting in oceans, hovering for a heartbeat before vanishing. Leah and Jonah stood together at the edge of the Persian Gulf. The ruins of Eridu lay quiet beneath the water, yet beneath the quiet, a subtle glow traced the old ziggurats. They closed their eyes, and in the resonance they heard not words, not instructions, but recognition. The earth was speaking, not to them, through them. "We have waited," the world seemed to say. "We have sung. You were always the song. The memory of light is yours again." Across the planet, millions awoke simultaneously. Not in alarm, not in fear, but with the clarity of understanding. Hands touched hands, hearts pulsed in unison. And for a moment, all cities, forests, mountains, and rivers became one conscious being. Not a god, not an alien, not a force outside of life, but life itself, remembering its own song. And in that remembering, the records of Sumer, the tablets, the crystals, the carved stones, finally revealed their secret. They were never history. They were prophecy. They were instruction manuals for a return to awareness. And now, humanity had arrived. The children traced the spirals of the Anunnaki with their fingers in the sand, their laughter vibrating into the air, activating the same resonance that built the first cities. Plants shifted subtly, growing in patterns never seen before. Birds flew in perfect geometric formations. Even the oceans pulsed with rhythm. No one forced it. No one controlled it. It happened because it was remembered. Leah knelt at the water's edge, feeling the pulse in her veins. She saw, in the reflected sky, figures from memory, not ghosts, not visions, but echoes of the first ones who had taught humans to measure the stars, to shape stone with sound, to breathe the song into life. They were smiling. Not at her, not at humanity, but with them. The circle had closed. The memory had returned. Jonah touched her hand. "We didn't find them," he whispered. "We found ourselves. And it's just the beginning." The world exhaled. And in that exhale, a new dawn rose. Not merely sunlight, not merely time moving forward, but a dawn of consciousness. The earth itself hummed, alive in recognition. The pulse settled into a rhythm, slow, steady, eternal. The stars above flickered, their light bending into shapes long forgotten, spirals, circles, constellations that mirrored the ancient tablets. It was not guidance, not prophecy, not instruction. It was homecoming. Months later, the crystalline tablets disintegrated into dust, their purpose fulfilled. But in every living thing, their song remained. The humans who had heard it, who had remembered, now carried the frequency in their very cells. It was encoded in heartbeat, breath, and thought. The children of the rememberers, and all those born after, would grow with this memory. Knowing without knowing, seeing without seeing, singing without sound. The earth no longer hid its secrets. The past, present, and future intertwined into a single thread of resonance. And the pulse continued, soft, infinite everywhere. Not heard, not measured, only felt. And somewhere beyond the visible stars, beyond the edge of known space, a faint light flickered. It pulsed in perfect rhythm with the earth below. Not alien, not divine, but familiar. The same pulse that had shaped Sumer. The same song that had awakened humanity was flowing outward, carrying the memory of light into the universe itself. The song would never end. It had no beginning. It had no conclusion. Only listeners. And we are them.